We're the Global Speakers Bureau. This is Knowledge Providers Podcast. I'm your host, Sergiusz Zgrzebski, here from Chicago. And joining us today is Aaron Ross, the sales guru behind the success of Salesforce, but also author, leader, and leadership coach. Aaron, it is a great pleasure to have you on Knowledge Providers Podcast. Did I catch you at the bad time?
Funny. No, actually, this is a good time. How can I help?
And obviously, this is one of many phrases from your best-selling book, Predictable Revenue. And oh boy, did I reread that book with pleasure. So many important nuggets. My favorite one, obviously, it is truth being the best marketing tool. Aaron, how are we doing in what decade plus since you written Predictable Revenue? How relevant that book became? What are the challenges in today's business world that you would think the Predictable Revenue 2.0 would include?
Yeah, well, it's a great question because between Predictable Revenue, which came out about a decade ago, and the sequel, which is called From Impossible to Inevitable, wrote with Jason Lemkin, and the rise of a couple things, influencers, like especially on LinkedIn, as well as AI now. I see all the time is everyone, and I get it, it's good marketing. Predictable revenue is dead, or outbound is dead, or insert blank thing is dead. I did the same thing. In my book, I put cold calling instead. It's not really dead. So what I see is actually, a lot of techniques and things get outdated and change. And that's going to just speed up in terms of techniques might have worked for several years back when the book came out, or maybe even 5 years or a decade. And now they might work for 5 or 10 months because it's just getting faster and faster. AI is just speeding everything up. But I do feel like there's a couple core, like the core ideas of both books. I'm going to lump them together because I'll start with predictable revenue, right? Specializing your sales teams. That will evolve. But it's this idea that closers close, prospectors prospect, inbound lead responders respond, and customer success, and there's basically people after the sale that take care of customers. That won't stop, but the way you specialize may change. So one of these areas might be taken by AI or enhanced, or there's more variety in the ways you can structure teams today. There's more of a spectrum across everything, whether it's genders or ways you set up your sales teams. So again, people doing fewer things better is always going to be something that works. This other idea around the types of leads you generate, seeds, nets, and spears, you can generate them through word of mouth, which are always the best, but harder, right? Seeds, kind of broadcasting, marketing, social media, or spears, outbound. Those basic techniques will still work in understanding how do we generate what kinds of leads, but they blend more as there's more ways to combine in classic inbound and classic outbound. So there's this, again, spectrumization of everything. But the core principle is, do we know what kinds of leads we want to generate and how each type is different? Kind of the faster closing word of mouth type, the slower but bigger outbound type, kind of like, so you have different funnels. So that's going to be the same. And there's an idea that wasn't in predictable revenue that was the big missing piece, which is why it was the beginning of the next book, From Impossible to Inevitable, which is probably actually the most important lesson today and for the future around this, is nailing your niche. And the lesson there really is more about, specializing. I'll also use focusing, being more focused on a more targeted, more narrowly defined ideal customer, understanding their, like being able to put your heart and mind in their shoes to understand what it feels like to be them, and then being able to communicate in their language. So as the world gets busier, and there's more of everything, not just noise, but more types, and it becomes even more important that you can kind of sharply tune your radio signal to resonate with the right people. And that's the foundation for, I think that is besides actually having your team of people, can decide nailing your niche is the actual foundation for making everything else easier.
So essentially, your two books laid very clearly So why do you think so few of us actually make it in the business? Whether it's you're at the beginning of the lead generation or the account management, it seems like it all boils to one thing. This is a relationship-based vehicle for success.
I mean, honestly, that is a great way. I like to look at it that way because, it's like, how do you make relationships that are kind of light and based more on value and transactions, right? For smaller deals, how do you create deeper relationships based more on trust and kind of a different kind of value for complex sales and bigger deals? And so kind of where I go now, because, my current keynote and the title might be changing a little bit, but it's called The Dark Side of Predictable Revenue. Right? Because for me, and this is the short version, 2020, I was like, I've been doing this for a decade. I'm burned out on sales and this type of business. My books have driven 50 million in revenue, cumulative, right? So millions a year. But I was kind of trapped. It was like the partnership, the business, and the work. I didn't like it. I wasn't interested. I wasn't inspired. There was no creative spark. But, you get trapped into kind of this success. And over a couple of years, I, got out. Long story. So now I'm like, okay, I kind of found my spark. I guess this is a bit longer story, but I'm really excited to go back into helping coaching founders and CEOs for now on writing how they can craft their business book, where they can work on it part-time, but it makes millions. And so for me, it's like these big themes to kind of AI proof, because I'm not going to be in the weeds with AI. That's not where I am. And these people who can spend 24/7 just like experimenting. So I'm just really drawn toward these things I think every leader should be aware of and focused on in their scheme, which is, at least for me, work that I can have a creative spark with, or I'm inspired a bit by, where I have some energy, where I want to get better at it. Again, in predictable revenue, I just got to the point where it didn't matter how many whips were on my back to kind of create new stuff or to do more. And like, I was just dead to it. So now, like, I've got a creativity that like stuff is coming and I don't even have to try. And it's really about, I like working with good people. So like, I want to connect with people and meet people and talk to them. And not even because I'm trying to get a lead or a result. Like, I just like people. And that's like I think the best kind of relationship with them, where I'm not, whether it's even at scale through my newsletter or kind of one-to-one, it's not faked, right? So kind of like creative spark, the type of work you're doing, focus on people, which could also be your team or your customers or your family, yourself. And this other thing around, also being outside. I feel like a lot of people, myself included, you get to this point, I got to this point, and the pandemic just sped it up. I was just being sick of being on screens and sitting down. And, for me, having a big family, we got 10 children. For so many years, I'm used to I kind of have to always be moving. And so even at the pandemic, kind of sitting down more, being on Zoom more than ever, I can't do, it's killing me. Again, this whole idea of like, what is the creative spark to keep things moving? By the way, of not just 10 kids, but 5 dogs, a cat, and 7 horses. So the horses aren't inside the house, but I hear the dogs. And like, again, when AI and future, these technologies are able to replicate all this content good at scale, good isn't good enough. So you need something new-ish, whether that's the type of content, the style, something, that intuitive, energetic vitality that you can't copy. And so for me, like being some screens, like we're on a screen now, but like being out more in nature, seeing interesting people, doing this kind of work where I'm more inspired, not every day, but in general, and excited for it. Like, I think this is the type of, however you implement this in your sales team, marketing, or like whatever your business is, these elements that people are gonna have to kind of keep in mind and have as your foundation to keep your team there, your customers engaged, and to stop because it's gonna be much easier than ever for people to copy your stuff, whether it's your product or your marketing, recruit your people. So what's your differentiation? Why should people stay with you, whether they're your team or your customers? How are you going to keep yourself from getting burned out, where you're just, slogging, and it's going to make it even easier for people to come poach your business or your team. So that's where I am right now, is creating this, and I'm going to be creating more content in these keynotes around these topics as well.
So creating your unique value proposition. And what's in the keynotes as opposed to writing a book? I mean, in terms of your creative process, that's the first part of that question. Second, you mentioned nature and you mentioned in-person experience. So are we compensating for the creativity lost during the pandemic? Creativity that's within that Zoom meeting, that online experience?
I don't think it's something we lost in the pandemic. I think that, it was inevitable anyway with the growth of technology. It's just easier than ever to create more apps. AI is just speeding this up. It was already happening, right? So this deluge of content and apps and stuff and copycat syndrome, where everything kind of starts to sound the same and feel the same, it creates this deadening effect. And you're on the hamster wheel, or you can be. It's kind of a choice. How do you get off in some ways? So, I just think that looking forward, because we're in this headed to this direction where if we're trying to do everything the same as we used to, which is everyone works 9 to 5, like work harder, get on more Zoom calls, more meetings, more email, more chat, more social, like all this screen-based stuff, it just, we lose the ability to innovate and compete effectively. Well, it's like, you can compete cutthroat to cutthroat, but who wants to do that? I want to be a market of one, right? So, and I don't think that's going to happen if you're just kind of going through the motions, the same old sales, product, marketing, and people plays. And I think that because the world's going to be so busy, so competitive, again, for your customers or your team or your time and energy as a person, at least what I see, the way to escape that trap and kind of create that differentiation and, market of one is, find, easier said than done, but it took me 3 years. Work that inspires you, whether it's new or kind of evolving it. There's good people to do it with, like making money with people that I like. For me, being out in nature, not all the time, but it's a way, again, to kind of keep that spark. I'm just drawn towards it. So we were buying a retreat center. We live in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we're buying a retreat center in the west part of Scotland. And one part is I want to be on the land more. I want to work more with my hands. And I can get people together in person, groups of 10 or 20 people, like whether it's around wellness retreats or like book writing, or it's not that important yet, but I know getting people together in person for me is important, and for them. And it's not even about doing a lot of work. It's about that clarity and connection. Clarity is the world gets busier, is leverage, and connection with great relationships is leverage as well in a lot of ways, nothing happens faster than the speed of trust. So, again, this is the way I'm drawn to these things, but I do see them as ways to stay ahead of AI and all this other shit happening in the world that is, for a lot of people, going to, it's like, do you want to get ahead of change, or do you want it to be there, snap at your heels, forcing you to change because your revenue's already dropped off a cliff?
Right. Count me in for that retreat for sure. Now, it seems like what you're saying is mostly very true and so true in the US. The hamster wheel you're mentioning, and economy at large. So what's keeping Aaron at night right now the most?
What's keeping me up? Well, see, I'm married with 10 children, 5 dogs. So so we have 6 kids here in Edinburgh and 4 older ones in the States, between time zones, and my family's in the States. So it's often literally like walking dogs early in the morning, walking late at night, my body clock. Now, talking to kids, so what am I worried about? I'm not that worried yet about things. It's hard to explain because I feel like I'm doing everything I need to do. I have a lot of trust in the world that things are working out for me, right? I do believe in a higher power through experience. Some people do, some people don't. Everything happens for a reason. It's not just a cliche. And even when I was leaving predictable revenue, the business, which is like this brand, I'm making a lot of money and support the family. And it was honestly scary to think, okay, I made a lot of money through that, like personally $10 million, but like with 10 children, it's amazing how the cost, um, but to go from, okay, I've got this safe brand is kind of worldly, known around the world, and to leaving that because it's just killing me, and doing something new. Like, how am I going to create a new brand and business that's going to replace all this income, this high six-figure income almost from scratch? And of course, my partner is buying me out over 4 years. Although after a year and a half, the business was struggling and he had to stop paying me. So it's like I had this huge income drop. So there's a lot of tense moments called, tons of juggling, whether it's like emotional, family, time, schedule, money, like a lot of people did, I'm sure, during the pandemic too. And but I just knew having like one of the benefits of a big family is just stuff ends up working out one way or the other. And trying to control it is you can't try to control you can't control things. It's more for me knowing, hey, this is going to work out. Like I'm going to find work. I have no idea what it is, find work that I like to do. And I would do anyway, even if I wasn't getting paid. And it's probably going to take a while. I think it took 3 years. I know it's going to happen. I just don't know when. And so that's like a big part of my thing. And my had kids tell me it really helps them thinking it's not if, it's when, right? And a younger one is like, oh, it's not if I'll be successful, it's when I'll be successful. For that one child, it resonated with them. Some kids don't care about that. So this kind of it's when, not if, is a big part of just the mindset around a lot of things. And again, I think it's having a big family, and it's impossible to outwork, to use brute force with time and energy or control to make things work. There's a lot of force to be with, communication, trust, letting things go, doing my best. But the last thing is being pushed against the wall physically, it's like physically, emotionally, financially for a lot of years, also kind of forced me early, my life, 'cause I'm only 52, still young, to think, you know what, if I don't find work, and I've been supporting everyone around me for so many years, right? I've been father, husband, CEO, entrepreneur, business person, partner, da da da. And I looked away and lost myself. So I got to the point of, okay, I've done everything for everyone else for so long. Like, what about me? Like, what do I actually want to do? If I could, what do I want to do? What's the thing I would actually enjoy doing? And for a long time, I had no idea. So again, it's kind of being forced out of that and forced to kind of spend this time, reconnecting with like, what do I want to do at this next phase? Is resulting in something, again, this being energized by type of work. I hadn't really occurred to me, honestly, or at least for years. And like listening to these little glimmers or whispers that are so easy to ignore, like, oh, there's some new books that I want to write that are different, right? One's called Income Operating System, one's called Eat, Shit, and Grow, and the other is fiction. And the fiction one is the one where I was like, fiction? Like, that just seems weird, but no, all right. I kind of slowing down to listen to those things. It's leading me to a place where I feel a lot more creativity, energy, enthusiasm, and those are leading towards, I can already see an easier time to kind of define a new business and launch a new business. Where it's not even launched, I have people who've been kind of messaging me already. It just feels so much easier and more enjoyable than the slogs I've done before. So, again, the way people do this when they're ready is going to be different for everybody. Kind of like how you specialize and focus your people. There's not one way to do it. But I think what I also want to be sharing with people as I talk, not only some business lessons around this, that, and the other, but for the future, this idea of like, how do you tap back into more inspiration, engagement, connection, good people, work that's going to be AI, how do you AI proof yourself, chaos proof yourself and your business and your team, as much as you can, against all the accelerating pace of change in the world and competition and copycats.
I guess it's all about being human and having so much grace as you do, Aaron. What's the one book that our listeners and viewers should read this year to crush it 2024?
You know, of mine, which I can't think of other people's books right now, but the best one for mine to start with is one that's out right now, From Impossible to Inevitable. So it's you know, been called it's in a lot of top 10 SaaS growth books. People have called the best business book they've ever read type of thing. That was when I
Well,
did
thank
with
you so much
Let Me
for
Get Faster.
inviting us to your home today, Aaron. Aaron Ross, sales guru, leader, author, and if you'd like more information, obviously, about keynotes by Aaron, contact Global Speakers Bureau. This was a
Okay.
Knowledge Providers podcast. Again, thank you, Aaron, for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you live.
Yeah, thanks, Sergio.